Hi, first and second graders. Welcome to the second part of the end of 100 Dresses. It's me, Miss Townhouse again. I apologize for the first video cutting out. I realized that on my screen recorder app, it's called Screencast-O-Matic. If you're wondering how I was able to split this screen to kind of put me in the little box and to show you my screen, I only get 15 minutes per video. So I'm going to try to make this only in two parts. Again, thank you for your patience. Shall we continue? Okay. The two girls, let's see, where were we? Oh, brr, how drab and cold and cheerless it was up here on the heights. In the summertime, the woods, the sumac, and the ferns that grew along the brook on the side of the road were lush and made this a beautiful walk on Sunday afternoons. But now it did not seem beautiful. The brook had shrank to the merest trickle. Oh, I think we read this before. Okay. The two girls hurried on. They hoped to get to the top of the hill before dark. Otherwise, they were not certain they could find Wanda's house. At last, this is new. Pulling and panting, they rounded the top of the hill. The first house, that old rickety one, belonged to Old Man Svensson. Peggy and Maddie hurried past it almost on tiptoe. Somebody said once that Old Man Svensson had shot a man. Others said, nonsense, he's an old good-for-nothing and wouldn't hurt a flea. But, false or true, the girls breathed more freely as they rounded the corner. It was too cold and drizzly for Old Man Svensson to be in his customary chair tilted against the house, chewing and spitting tobacco juice. Even his dog was nowhere in sight and had not barked at the girls from wherever he was. I think that's where the Petronskis live, said Maddie, pointing to a little white house with lots of chicken coops at the side of it. Wisps of old gray grass stuck up here and there along the pathway like thin, wet kittens. The house in its sparse little yard looked shabby but clean. It reminded Maddie of Wanda's one dress, her faded blue cotton dress, shabby but clean. There was not a sign of life about the house except for a yellow cat, half-grown, crouching on the one small step close to the front door. It leapt timidly with a small cry halfway up a tree where the girls came into the yard. Peggy knocked firmly on the door, but there was no answer. She and Maddie went around to the backyard and knocked there. Still, there was no answer. Wanda, called Peggy. They listened sharply, but only a deep silence pressed against their eardrums. There was no doubt about it. The Petronskis were gone. Maybe they just went away for a little while and haven't really left with their furniture yet, suggested Maddie hopefully. Maddie was beginning to wonder how she could bear the fact that Wanda had actually gone and that she might never be able to make amends, right? To make up. Well, said Peggy, let's see if the door is open. They cautiously turned the knob of the front door. It opened easily, for it was a light thing and looked as though it was furnished but frail protection against the cold winds that blew up here in the winter. The little square room that the door opened into was empty. There was absolutely nothing left in it. And in the corner, a closet with its door wide open was also empty. Maddie wondered what it had held before the Petronskis moved out. And she thought of Wanda saying, sure, 100 dresses all lined up in the closet. Well, anyway, real and imaginary dresses alike were gone. The Petronskis were gone. And now how could she and Peggy tell Wanda anything? Maybe the teacher knew where she had moved to. Maybe Old Man Svensson knew. They might knock on his door and ask on the way down. Or the post office might know. If they wrote a letter, Wanda might get it because the post office might forward it. Feeling very discouraged, the girls closed the door and started for home. Coming down the road, way, way off in the distance through the drizzle, they could see the water of the bay, gray and cold. Do you suppose that was their cat and they forgot her? Asked Peggy. But the cat wasn't anywhere now, and as the girls turned the bend, they saw her crouching under the wooden chair in front of Old Man Svensson's house. So perhaps the cat belonged to him. They lost their courage about knocking on his door and asking when the Petronskis had left, and anyways, goodness, here was Old Man Svensson himself, coming up the road. Everything about Svensson was yellow, his house, his cat, his trousers, his droopy mustache and hair, his hound loping behind him, and the long streams of spit he expertly shot between his scattered yellow teeth. He sounds really scary. The two girls drew over to the side of the path as they hurried by. When they were a good way past, they stopped. Hey, Mr. Svensson, yelled Peggy. Do you know where the Petronskis moved to? Old man Svensson turned around but said nothing. Finally, he did answer, but his words were unintelligible, and the two girls turned and ran down the hill as fast as they could. Old man Svensson looked after them for a moment and then went up on the hill, muttering to himself and scratching his head. When they were back down on Oliver Street again, the girls stopped running. Maddie wondered if she was going to be unhappy about Wanda and the 100 dresses forever. Nothing would ever seem good to her again, because just when she was about to enjoy something like going for a hike with Peggy, she'd bump right smack into the thought that she had made Wanda Petronsky move away. Well, anyway, said Peggy, she's gone now, so what can we do? Besides, when I was asking her all about her dresses, she probably was getting good ideas for her drawings. She might not even have won the contest otherwise. Maddie carefully turned this idea over in her head, for if there was anything in it, she would not have to feel so bad. But that night she could not sleep. She thought about Wanda and her faded blue dresses and the little house she lived in, and old man Svensson living just a few steps away. And she thought of the glowing picture those 100 dresses made, all lined up in the classroom. At last, Maddie sat up in bed and pressed her forehead tight in her hands and thought. This was the hardest thinking she had ever done. After a long, long time, she reached an important conclusion. She was never going to stand by and say nothing again. If she ever heard anybody picking on someone because they were funny looking or because they had a strange sounding name, she would speak up. Even if it meant losing Peggy's friendship, she had no way of making things right with Wanda. But from now on, she would never make anybody else so unhappy again. Finally, all tired out, Maddie fell asleep. Chapter 7. On Saturday, Maddie spent the afternoons with Peggy. They were writing a letter to Wanda Petronsky. It was just a friendly letter telling them about the contest and telling Wanda she had won. They told her how pretty her drawings were and that they were now studying about Winfield School at school, and they asked her if she liked where she was living now, if she had a new teacher. They had meant to say they were sorry, but it ended up with their just writing a friendly letter, the kind any good friend would have written. They signed it with lots of X's for love. They mailed the letter to Boggins Heights, writing "Please forward" on the envelope. The teacher had not known where Wanda had moved to, so their only hope was the post office. Days passed. There was no answer, but the letter did not come back, so maybe Wanda had received it. Perhaps she was so hurt and angry she was not going to answer it. You could not blame her. Maddie remembered the way she hitched her left shoulder up as she walked to school alone, and how the girls always said, "Why does her dress always hang so funny like that? And why does she wear those high-lace shoes?" They knew she didn't have a mother, but they hadn't thought about it before. They hadn't thought she had to do her own washing and ironing. She only had one dress, and she must have had to wash and iron it overnight. Maybe sometimes it wasn't dry when it was time to put it on in the morning, but it was always clean. Several weeks went by, and still Wanda did not answer. Peggy had begun to forget the whole thing, and Maddie put herself to sleep at night making speeches about Wanda, defending her from great crowds of girls who were trying to tease her with, "How many dresses have you got?" Before Wanda could press her lips together in a tight line, and before she did any answering, Maddie would cry out, "Stop! This girl is just a girl like you are!" And then everybody would feel ashamed the way she used to feel. Sometimes she rescued Wanda from a sinking ship or the hooves of a runaway horse. "Oh, that's all right," she'd say when Wanda thanked her with dull eyes. Now there was snow on the ground, right? So time is passing and still no response. So they have a holiday party, right? And after the party, the teacher had a surprise. She showed the class a letter she had received that morning. "Guess who this is from?" she said. "You remember Wanda Petronsky, right? The bright little artist who won the drawing contest? Well, she has written me, and I'm glad to know where she lives now because I can send her her medal. I want to read her letter to you." The class sat up with a sudden interest and listened intently as Miss Mason read the letter. "Dear Miss Mason, how are you in room 13? Please tell the girls they can keep those 100 dresses because in my new house I have 100 new ones all lined up in my closet. I'd like that girl Peggy to have the drawing of the green dress with the red trimming, and her friend Maddie to have the blue one. For the holidays, I miss that school, and I miss school, and my new teacher does not really, it says equalize with you. Merry Christmas to you and everybody. Yours truly, Wanda Petronsky." The teacher passed the letter around the room for everyone to see. It was pretty, right? On the way home from school, Maddie and Peggy held their drawings very carefully. They had stayed late to help straighten up after the play, and it was getting dark. The house looked wan and inviting, with, so everyone is decorating in their house. Sorry, I'm running a bit out of time. I really want to finish this for you. The colors are like the colors in Wanda's 100 dresses. Yes, said Peggy, holding her drawings out to look under the street lamp. And boy, this shows she really liked us. It shows she got our letter, and this is her way of saying that everything's all right. And that's that, she said with a finality. Peggy felt so happy and relieved. I hope so, said Maddie. She felt sad because she knew she would never see the little tight-lipped girl again, and she couldn't ever really make things right between them. She went home and pinned her drawing, over a place, right, in her pink-flowered, wallpapered bedroom. The shabby room came alive from the brilliancy of the colors. Maddie sat down on the edge of her bed and looked at the drawing. She had stood by and said nothing, but Wanda had been nice to her anyways. Tears blurred her eyes, and she gazed at the picture for a long time. She studied it intently. The colors in the dress were so vivid she had scarcely noticed the face and head of the drawing. But it looked like her, Maddie. It really did, right? Wanda Petronsky wore the same blue faded dress to school every day. It was always clean, but it looked as though it had never been ironed properly. One day when a classmate showed up wearing a bright new dress that was much admired, Wanda said suddenly, I have 100 dresses at home. That had started the teasing game of dresses, which Peggy and Maddie played with Wanda. It was fun to stop Wanda on the way to school and ask, how many dresses did you say you had? Wanda did have the 100 dresses, and this is the story of how Peggy and Maddie came to understand about them and what the game had meant to Wanda. Right? And that is the end of 100 Dresses. And so I want you to be thinking about what was your favorite part, and were you expecting Wanda and her family to just pick up and move away, and what maybe you would have done if you had seen Wanda on the playground and people were making fun of her. So you can tell me something you loved about the story, maybe your favorite part, or something that was a little surprising or shocking about the story, or anything that you would like to share. I would love to read and listen to your responses, and I can't wait to talk to you and read to you next week. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.